Hi there, and welcome to another knitted snowflake tutorial. Today we're knitting my new design, and if you've watched any of my other videos or familiar with my knitted snowflake patterns, you will notice right away that the middle of this snowflake resembles a lot my other snowflake, the lattice snowflake pattern. And there's a reason for that, because that middle section is exactly the same, is knitted exactly the same as the one in this pattern. For that reason, I'm going to skip the first 6 rounds, because if you need help with this section here, then you can simply watch part 1 of my lattice snowflake tutorial, and then you'll be ready to proceed after watching that video. But that's the easiest part in this pattern, and you may not have to watch it at all. But if you do, please watch that other part that I'm going to link in the description to this video. So once you completed the first 6 rounds, your knitting is gonna look like this. In the pattern, I recommend that at this point you switch to your circular needles, but at the moment my circular needles are occupied with the next step of this snowflake. That's why I will show you another way you can knit. You can proceed without the circular needles if you don't have them, or if they are like mine, occupied with something else. So now we're proceeding with the round 7, and in round 7 we begin as follows. We are doing the KFB increase, which is done by knitting into the front and then back stitch. It's the same stitch, only first we're knitting into the front of it and then the back leg of it. Now we are going to keep the first of the made stitches on our right hand needle. Then we are going to use the second one we made. We're going to place it back to our left hand needle, and using that stitch we are going to decrease, or rather bind off 2 stitches, 1 and 2. At this point, because I'm not using my circular needles, what I'm going to do, I'm going to place this stitch onto a stitch holder, this tiny little one stitch holder. I'm gonna place it onto this and just leave it like that. It's gonna be a live stitch. So now we bound off 2 stitches. The next we are going to shape this first little point on our snowflake. It's this section here. That's what we are going to be working on right now. So, and we are going to do it by casting on 2 stitches using knitted cast on method. We're gonna cast on 1 and cast on 2. Next we are going to bind off these 2 stitches. Pay attention that this is the base stitch and these are the 2 new stitches, so you always have 1 stitch more than what you cast on. So if you accidentally slip that first stitch, it may not work out the way it should, so pay attention to that. So now we're binding off 2 stitches and returning our base stitch back to the left hand needle. Now we created the first little point. Next, knitting into that stitch again, we're gonna make or knitted cast on 2 more stitches, 1 and 2, and once again we are going to bind off 2 stitches, 1 and 2. Once again, placing the stitch back to the left hand needle and casting on 2 more stitches, 1, 2. Like I said, if you watched any of my other videos, this will be already familiar to you, and a piece of cake. So binding off 2 more, 1, 2, and this time on the last one, instead of just binding off 2 stitches, we are going to bind off 4 stitches, 3 and 4, placing the last stitch back to a left hand needle. Here we shaped our first little point in the middle of our snowflake, and next we are going to knit the following stitch and the last stitch from right hand needle together, knitting them together. This was the first repeat. Now we're going to repeat this 5 more times. So we're going to start with knitting into the front, then back leg of the stitch, placing the second made stitch back onto our left hand needle. And now you see we have 2 live stitches here. If you were using, once again, if you were using circular needles, they would just remain on your circular needle. But since I am not using it right now, I'm going to place these 2 new stitches onto a stitch holder, and we'll be able to pick them up the next time. Now we're going to repeat what we did previously. So we're going to use the second of the KFB stitches, and we are going to bind off 2 stitches, 1, 2, and once again we're going to shape a point, a little point, by knitted cast on 2 stitches, 1 and 2, binding off 2, 1 and 2, placing it back on the left hand needle and repeating this 2 more times. 1, cast on 1, cast on 2, and bind off 2, 1, 2, oops, 2, and do it 1 more time, 1, 2, only on the last one we are binding off 4 instead of just 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, placing the stitch back to the left hand needle and knitting these 2 stitches together like this. So that was the end of the second repeat, and you have to repeat this 3 more times. So you will proceed by KFB, knitting to the front and back of this stitch, then placing the 2 live stitches on the stitch holder, or they will remain on your circular needle, and you're going to continue this way until the end of the round. And at the end of the round, this is how it's going to look for you. So you're going to have 12 live stitches on your stitch holders or on your circular needle, and this is what it looks like. So this was the last time you knitted 2 stitches together. So now we are going to place, well, it should look like this. So you would have this 1 stitch on a stitch holder and 1 last one on your right hand needle. So now what we're going to do is we're going to place the stitch from stitch holder back to your needle, and as we continue to knit, we will pick up the rest of the live stitches. So we are ready to knit round, which round is that? That's round 8. So round 8, we are doing the following. So with these 2 stitches, first we're going to knit the second stitch through its back loop from behind the first stitch, and then we're gonna knit the first stitch on the needle like that and slip it onto your right hand needle. Next, you're doing a backwards loop cast on, and you cast on 8 stitches the following way: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that's all we need. Okay, here we are placing the next 2 live stitches onto our needle, or if it's your circular needle, they already will be on your left hand needle. And we're repeating what we did previously. We knit the second stitch first from behind the first one, and then knit the first stitch like this, and do the 8 stitches, casting on 8 stitches with backwards loop cast on method. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Once again, placing the next 2 live stitches back onto your needle like that, removing the stitch holder. Because I'm using my double pointed needles, I have to add another needle now. So knitting the second stitch from behind the first one, and then knitting the first one, and one more time casting on 8 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, once again, placing the 2 live stitches back onto the needle, removing the stitch holder, and knitting the second stitch from behind the first one, and then knitting the first stitch, and one more time casting on 8 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now I'm going to need my next needle, placing the live stitches onto the needle, removing the stitch holder, and I'm going to need my other needle. So knitting from behind the first stitch, and then the second one, or the first one, first knitting the second one and then knitting the first one, and casting on 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And last time, the last 2 live stitches, doing exactly the same, knitting the second stitch from behind the first one, and knitting the first stitch, and finally last time casting on 8 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. This was round 8. In round 9, you're going to knit all of your stitches. If you haven't already used your circular needle, this would be a good round to knit all of your stitches with your circular needle, so that all the stitches, and there are 60 of them, are on your circular needle, and you're ready for the next round. And at this point, your snowflake will look like this. You will have a circle like that, and I already, on this one, I already knitted all the stitches plainly, and I'm ready to knit my final 10th round, which will be the round in which we are going to shape the points of our snowflake, and at the same time bind off all the stitches. And that I'm going to show you how to do that in my next video. So see you there. Bye for now.